Hello and welcome to another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson, the political and legal correspondent from the Lohman Abdo Law Firm here in Hudson, Wisconsin. We've been interviewing candidates who are running in the special election for the 10th Senate District. And today we have John Calabrese.
Calabrese, yep.
All right, John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir.
So, can I call you John?
Sure.
All right, John, we just met here today for the first time, and so I was asking you a little bit about your background. The viewers need to get to know who you are. So, I understand that your current residence is just in Dunn County, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Dunn County, little town of Tiffany, unincorporated, right outside of Glenwood City.
All right, and you live there with your wife of 7 years, and you have two boys, ages 3 and 5.
Yes.
Okay. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in western New York State, south of Rochester, New York, in a college town called Geneseo.
Okay, so it was in a college town. I guess I didn't get that when we were first talking, but upstate New York tends to be Republican country.
Sure.
And you were telling me off camera, so you had Republican parents.
Yep, I still do, and they are steadfast.
But you're running as a Democrat, just to
Yes.
get that clear here,
Yes.
because we have a three-way Democrat primary and we got a two-way Republican primary. Yes, and so what caused you to run on the Democratic ticket?
Well, you know, life experience. It took me out west to California for a while. A lot of my friends growing up in Western New York had liberal leanings, liberal parents, and so there wasn't a bunch of indoctrination going on, and I wasn't too involved in politics, but I just got different viewpoints. And then as I grew up, and I'm a word worker now, and I was worked at a shop in San Jose, California, really booming shop before the crash of 2008. Super busy. I became a supervisor in one of the departments there, and learned a lot about how things work in a non-union shop, the top-down dynamic. I was pushing for some raises for my guys who were really working hard, and I felt deserved it, and getting a lot of pushback. And so I did a lot of self-education about labor relations and what's been going on with the economy in terms of wages and things like that. And so my research led me to sort of be more in tune with the plight of the worker, and really wanting to focus on that. And so my leanings, and at that point, you know, when you get involved in politics in the year 2000 or, you know, mid-1990s, it's hard for someone who came from a Republican background, who kind of leans toward wondering what's been going on from the progressive side and learning about union work and stuff like that, to wholeheartedly jump on with the Democrats, because in my opinion, and in other people's opinion, is that they started to move to the right in the 90s, and I was seeing them as taking a lot of the Republican traits on. And so I would probably say I ended up being more to the left than definitely the current modern day Democratic.
Well, I think it's fascinating. So it was this exposure to, you said, labor relations, being a supervisor in a non-union shop. Mm-hmm. You did have some college experience, you said, in your younger years, and but you were drawn towards a trade, which was woodworking. So yes. You've been your primary occupation.
Yes.
And you are now 41 years old.
Yes.
You don't look it, so, but
thank you.
Anyway, with that kind of working class or middle class background, and for the working plight, what are your issues? Why are you running for the Senate District?
Well, I have my own shop now over in Tiffany, and I'd started to volunteer with some groups. I started to become concerned about the environment and most everything that I was concerned about, and I wanted to volunteer a little bit of my time because it made me feel better than just complaining about the news or feeling frustrated. But most issues that I was concerned about led me back to the money and the people influencing the decisions that are made or the decisions that aren't made. And so I thought, if I'm ever going to fix something that I want to be fixed, I have to work to root out the money. And so I found a group it's called Wolf Pack, and there are several groups trying to fight money in politics, but that one.
Common Cause is another one.
Yes.
That's, yeah.
United to Amend, Represent Us. There are a bunch of really good groups. I was drawn to Wolf Pack because it seemed to have a plan with teeth, and I see how difficult it is to get something really done in that regard because of how deep the money goes.
So this is all something that started since coming to Wisconsin
Yes.
around 2009.
Yep.
Okay, and so you found this wolf pack, and you got involved, and you actually became the state director.
Yes. When I started, there were only 5 to 10 active volunteers, and then a couple years later, when I was the state director, we had a real boom in membership in the lead up to the 2016 election, and then afterwards as well. And the plan, which I feel has given me the experience to...
This is the plan with the teeth in it you were mentioning.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. To hold this position that I'm seeking is that it wasn't just a protest movement. It wasn't just getting some referendums, which are noble things. There's nothing against them. But our plan was to get an actual resolution passed through Madison. And so, in so doing, we had to go there and find someone to introduce it. We had to find co-sponsors. We had to work on it in a committee. And so I spent a lot of trips to Madison, meeting with legislators and staff and debating them on the issue, and kind of really understanding how things work or don't work there.
Right, and I want to hear more about that, but just to give context, this is all something that you did in the last year or two?
Well, 5 years.
Over the course of 5 years.
We got the resolution introduced in 2 consecutive sessions.
All right, but as far as I can recall, those 5 years would have been one-party control of the governorship and also one-party control of both houses.
Yes.
So how was that received for the reforms that you're looking for as far as anti-corruption?
Well, we had a really progressive Democrat introduced for us both times, Senator Chris Larson from Milwaukee. And the first time we got, I think, 5 or 6 other senators on board and 14 in the Assembly side, all Democrats. And it was real fascinating to learn not just how deep the money goes even in Madison, but, and from what I've heard, it is similar in other state houses, but really pointed in Madison in terms of towing the party line, especially on the Republican side. And I met with lots of staff and some legislators on the Republican side who, off the record told me that they hate raising money. They really want to sign on. And a common thing that you would hear is kind of like looking over your shoulder, like, did anybody else sign on to this yet? And they, once that wave would start rolling, I would imagine we could get some people. But it was all Democrats, both sessions.
Both sessions. Even the second one, did you get a few more from the Democratic side, or?
Actually, we got less. And the reason is because of our plan is to, as I was telling you off camera, it's to call for an Article 5 Convention of States. And by the time and for the specific purpose of addressing the problem of money in politics. And so by the time the second session rolled around, there were other groups who had similar plans for different reasons. There's the Balanced Budget Amendment. There's one to just call an open constitutional convention. And it spread a lot of fear because of the uncertainty of it. And so a lot of the Democrats who signed on in the first session weren't so...
That's what I recall, was there was some backlash because folks are worried that if you call for a constitutional convention, then some very good things that we've already got would be repealed possibly, right, or some things that aren't being advertised as being the purpose of it would come out. It would be more of a secret, surprise
right,
ambush, if you will.
Yeah.
So where did that leave you? I mean,
Well, it was, just to wrap up on that point, interestingly enough, after the 2016 election, and this is what one of the lines I tell people, because my focus is money in politics, and I know people.
So you would be in favor of draining the swamp, huh?
Indeed, and it's funny. It's perfect that you say that, because despite a lot of my liberal friends and their fears after the Trump election, living where I do in rural Wisconsin, I'm just fascinated by politics in general. And in the lead up to it, there were people who I would see at the dump or at the store or on the job site when I did some construction things who really jumped on the Trump train in the summer leading up to it. And folks that I know are good people, and they weren't, I knew that they didn't listen to or weren't attracted by racism, bulliness or xenophobia or any of that stuff. But what spoke to them, and I had more than one person tell me about that moment on stage when our now president said, it was at the primary and there were tons of people on stage with him, and he said, "I've given to everybody on this stage, and when I give, they're there for me." and that's a sick system. And then the camera panned across everybody on the stage, and they're all looking at their shoes because they know it's true. And that's what spoke to people out here. And so, because they he's never going to ask me for money, everybody's crooked. And so, no matter how the members of my team at that point felt after the election, we were kind of invigorated because we thought this state was really pivotal for him winning. And if we can take that message to Madison starting in 2017, new session, we got it introduced quick. And with that message from our friends and neighbors who voted for Trump, we went to Republicans and thought that they would say, okay, let's sign on to this. Also, because the balanced budget, Article 5, is passed in Madison with 53 co-sponsors, all Republicans, and we didn't get one single Republican to sign on to ours. And
even though they're in favor of a constitutional convention,
yes.
They don't want to take money out of politics.
Yes. Yep, not a single one. And I know some of them do, but they can't go out on their own. And
they're afraid.
Yes. And
so you're running to bring some courage to the system.
Yes.
You're ready to take this on and not worry so much about the labels of Republican, Democrat, liberal,
That's right.
conservative.
That's right. And I've said from the onset that I'm not going to take any corporate or PAC money, and I'm going to do my best to stay away from committee money, even from the Democrats. And I've talked to some people in these last frantic few weeks who ask me why, and they say that's foolish. And the reason why is because I think it's a real critical problem with why the Democrats can't speak more forcibly about campaign finance at the national level and in Madison. Because especially due to recent changes in 2015 to the campaign finance laws in Wisconsin, campaign committees can now take donations from corporations, from outside groups that bundle money for
So
other
instead of moving
corporations.
away from getting the big money out of politics, it's kind of made it easier.
Right. And if you break it down and look at the groups who fund the Republicans as opposed to the groups who fund the Democrats, and in some instances there are certain people who fund both,
Right.
that when the Democrats take that money, it necessarily means that they can't come to the stage and say, we need to root out all this money, because they're taking some of it too.
Makes them hypocrites.
Right. And it's not that they go in saying, ooh, I'm going to be corrupted too and sneakily take that money. And no, it's not the point, but they think they can't compete without it. And my message is, it's not just this issue, but this issue touches every other issue. So if you're concerned about the environment and the quality of your land and water and the fact that there are too many high-capacity wells sucking out our groundwater and polluting our surface water with the huge CAFO farms, and if you're concerned about public education and the infrastructure and whatever your concern is, it all comes back to the money. And that's what I want to do, is connect those dots.
So I'm going to take a wild guess here. You would not be in favor of the Citizens United decision.
No, not at all. Not at all. But the decisions that happened right around when I was born in 1976 are what started this train. And I feel this interesting arc of my life. And I obviously didn't know when I was born, but in 1976, Buckley v. Vallejo said that money is speech. And then the next year, the First National Bank of Boston versus Bilotti said that corporations can give to political campaigns. And so if you follow that course from 1980, when it really started to ramp up with Reagan, and then Clinton said that we need to compete too, so we need to take that money. There have been exhaustive studies, including a Princeton one that we cite all the time with the group I used to be with, that did an exhaustive, decades-long study of every policy that came out of D.C. In the last few decades. And donor opinion had a direct correlation to policy, and public opinion had almost no correlation. And so what that means is basically democracy is being taken away and almost gone,
Wow.
And so there is a way to get it back, and I think it's just getting back to the way it's supposed to be, knocking on doors. And
Right. Well, that grassroots, absolutely. But we've gone so far away from that. We don't have the Chautauquas, the get-togethers to talk about issues anymore. We have Facebook. And now they're talking about repealing the net neutrality. And so they're going to be, we're not going to be able to get the full scoop, and big money is going to be able to control our information, as they have already. I mean, media definitely is perceived to have biases in several areas, and you have to look really hard to try and find unbiased media. But where follow the money is basically your message. This is fascinating. Do you have other issues besides the money that you also would see as being important in your campaign?
Yeah, well, it's what first got me involved in any form of activism or volunteering is the environment. And it's really amazing to me still that 97% of the world's scientists didn't get together in a dark room and say, let's, foist this plot upon everybody about climate change and global warming. And it's happening. And there are still several people in this state house who deny that, even at this point. And what I'm seeing happen, I went to a clean water forum in Menominee a couple weeks ago with a really wonderful speaker, a scientist who used to work in Kansas, and just talking about how factory farming and the depletion of our resources really adds to the climate change because of all the huge feedlots and the methane that those cows produce. Our addiction to meat and dairy is depleting the waterways, and they don't come back. He had a picture of a colleague of his standing in an empty riverbed of what used to be the Arkansas River that ran through Kansas up into the Colorado, and it's gone. And so I'm really concerned about that for my two kids. And when I talk to my Republican friends, I say, you're a hunter, you're a fisherman, you hike, you kayak, and stuff like that. Do you think that the groups who are in Madison day to day pulling back local control, lessening regulation, opening up mining without any oversight really, or a lot less oversight, and so there'll be more tailing ponds and who knows how long that stuff takes to clean up. Do you think that there's a point on that speeding car that they're all going to slow down and say, no, let's wait a minute, we don't want to defile the entire wilderness? And no, because it's all about profit, and they'll chew the state up and spit it out and move on. And part of what I see government as is recognizing human nature, recognizing the drive to have more, and trying to just rein that in a little bit. And I don't think it's a crazy liberal idea to say in order to be sustainable and to have a future for our kids and grandkids, we got to slow it down. And so I'm really concerned about that, really concerned about education. My kids are just about school age, and just hear all sorts of sad stories about, not just the defunding, but the huge class sizes and the kids just sitting all day, just sitting. And I see the energy of my boys, and that makes me crazy. And there are different ways to do things, and I know it seems daunting, and we only have so much funding, but it has to start somewhere. And if we treat our kids like we treat the overarching push that they always talk about, jobs and business and growth, and if they're more focused on kids, then communities will grow from there. They're not going to grow around a mine.
Would you like to see a focus on education being more career ready as opposed to, necessarily just looking at four-year institutions for, what the next step is?
Yeah. Well, I think both can work, and I think, there is enough money to really dedicate ourselves to the kids, and you can look at models around the world that work, and instead of demonizing teachers and portraying them as rich people, getting rich off their pensions or something like that, I think it's not a radical idea to have two teachers in a classroom and kind of really guide the students into what they see as and what the teachers see as the right path for them in tandem with their parents. And so I think good, solid communities have kids that want to go into four-year schools, but not just for technical careers or math and science, which are very important. But I think to have a thriving society, we have to push arts and the humanities and theater and music, and that stuff inspires people and keeps people going.
And maybe the trades?
And definitely the trades. I'm a woodworker too, and that's very important. And I think we've gone away from that.
We have so many a lack of qualified people because we just don't have people with the interest level in those jobs. So we're a little out of whack, it seems.
Yeah, and it's tough to make a living too on those. Where I live now, part of our deal for being able to live there is we are caretakers on a farm that is it's sort of a venue for music and theater groups that come out from the Twin Cities to perform there. The folks that own it renovated the barn. Okay. And so that's the way that I can make it work. But if you want to start your own shop, like a woodworking shop or something like that, it's really tough. And it's because if I'm going to make a table for somebody, if they have the means to wait for how long it takes to get it done right, with the proper materials and the time, then it's going to cost money. You know, it's going to last forever, but it's going to cost money, and many people can't do that. And so that is one of the reasons people don't go into trades per se, because of the IKEAs and the Walmarts. People who don't have the funds will go there, and then unions are being pushed down. So if someone doesn't want to be an electrician, they can make a good living if they find the right niche and the right community and are lucky. But it's not something that's looked at as something that can be lucrative enough to have a better life for your kids, you know. And
all right, so you mentioned the environment, education, any other areas as far as, like, if John Calabrese were to be elected or to the state senate, what would where would your focus, other than going straight trying to get the money out, the anti-corruption?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think rural broadband is important. I think spreading cell service around to these hills that I drive up and down where my phone drops out is very important. I think, and like a bold attempt to restore the communities. And I've been driving through all these towns in the district, going to places and forums and meeting with people. Some towns I've admittedly never been to up north. I was in Dresser last night and up in Milltown, and there are songs written about the failing and falling apart of towns, and the stores all closed up, and I know it seems like it's just too far gone, but I don't think so. And if we have the budget to give $3 billion to a foreign company with a history of human rights abuse, Foxconn, where they don't have to guarantee any of the jobs that they're producing or guarantee the longevity of the company, then I think we could use that money for some new plans. Like, for instance, if there is a small business in Dresser that employs 2 or 3 employees, and they're paying them maybe not minimum wage, but somewhere $10 or $11, and we think of, okay, let's raise the minimum wage across the state to $15, $16, and people would shake their heads and say, I can't do that, and understandably so. I'm a small business owner. If I had a couple employees and I had to raise their pay that much, I'd go under. And I understand that. But if you have $3 billion to give, why not say, we will instead subsidize you for a period of time to bridge that gap from $10 to whatever the minimum wage is, and then what happens? Those people who get that money, they spend it almost instantly on the business next door. They might buy a table from me. They might buy some cabinets, and they invest in those communities. And that's where communities can build up, and it takes time. But I think that's an investment if you sell it properly to people, that they would say, oh man, that makes sense. That makes a lot more sense than a company all the way on the other side of the state that might not even benefit that community. You know, and I'd love to talk to other experts in the field and talk to other legislators who I know have been trying really hard to get things done. And a completely different topic, there are some legislators who've introduced a Badger Care for All system, and we could be, you know, a shining example in the country of a state that does that, because I've used the hospitals around here are fantastic, and the doctors are great, and the nurses are great, and we have the means to do that and take care of everybody. And that's not just a financial thing for people who get sick. It's a mental thing. You know, people who are paying a ton of money for their health insurance, or have plans when they're younger, you know, the catastrophic insurance plans. There's something there. If it's not in the front of your mind, it's in the back, that, oh, I better not get hurt at work. I better not get sick.
But is there the money there for that? You mentioned the Badger Care for All, because they're going to be looking for ways to reduce Medicare, and
I know,
given the tax cuts and so forth.
Yeah, and it would be even tougher if the federal tax cuts go through, which it looks like they will. But again, if I could bring to light where the money is going in this state, and think of all the tax credits that are given to well-connected people, and we start to rein that back in, you know, Badger Care for All wouldn't happen overnight, but maybe it could be a system that starts with just lowering the age for participation in the current Badger Care system, raising the the floor for your pay and gradually get there. And I think we
Well,
can.
John Calabrese, a man with a radical notion that men are created equal, and maybe that somebody that has just a lot of money doesn't necessarily should be entitled to more voice than someone who does not.
That's right. That's a good way of putting it.
Okay. Well, with that, thank you very much for being on our show.
Jamie.
Good luck on Tuesday,
Appreciate
and come back sometime, and we'll hopefully have you on again. All right.
I'd love to. Thank you.
Very good, and thank you for watching another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal.